The time has come for the Guzzlord PvP IV Deep Dive, letting you know the important stat checks and breakpoints for Guzzlord in both the Great League and Ultra League PvP formats, and the IVs that get you those stats, right? More importantly, too, letting you know how many trades you're going to have to do to get these IVs on Guzzlord as well. If you're not too familiar with the PvP IV Deep Dive series, I will be going over the true hidden stats of a Pokemon and their associated breakpoints here. If you're not familiar with these concepts, I highly recommend checking out the PvP IVs Simplified video, link up above in the description. Basically, get your feet wet before you dive off into the deep end here. And then, of course, I will be featuring PvP IV tables to make this all nice, neat, and simple. Those tables will be linked in the description in my article on GamePress here, the Guzzlord PvP IV Deep Dive. The article on GamePress also highlights all the information I'm talking about in this video in a nice, easy text-based format to reference as well. Without further ado, let's talk about Guzzlord. Before we talk about Guzzlord stats, I want to address the Brutal Swing versus Crunch debate here. Basically, Brutal Swing has higher damage per energy and a lower energy cost than Crunch does, so it is the obvious better choice on paper. However, Crunch has only a 5 higher energy cost, has stronger base damage despite not having higher damage per energy, and has a 30% chance to debuff the opponent's defense stat by 1 stage, which pairs really nicely with Dragon Tail. So Crunch is pretty tantalizing. And given the energy gains of Dragon Tail and Dragon Claw as a bait move paired with it, often Brutal Swing and Crunch will fall on the same turns to be utilized anyways, despite Brutal Swing having the lower energy cost. So in practice, they can kind of feel like they're getting thrown at the same time, with Crunch having all these additional benefits. That said, there are a lot of scenarios where Crunch will be one fast move behind, which is 3 turns behind, with the slow Dragon Tail, which I feel still keeps Brutal Swing as the objectively better move, but I think there are a lot of reasons to go with Crunch as well. So I think it comes down to you, your playstyle, what kind of team you're running, as far as if you want to go with Brutal Swing or Crunch. I'm personally on Team Brutal Swing, but I definitely do see the appeal of the Crunch side of the force. And then when it comes to Sludge Bomb as a possible third charge move, I think the move is just way too copium for the situation. I don't think you're OHKOing a lot of Pokemon with it either, where with Obstagoon using the Gunk Shot has a lot more uses for Obstagoon opposed to just fairy type Pokemon, and then the Gunk Shot can OHKO them. I don't see the Sludge Bomb doing it that often, so I think you kind of have to accept the fact that your Guzzlord's going down if it gets locked into a fairy type matchup, but don't let me discourage you if you do see some hidden potential for the Sludge Bomb as well. Just basic, simple recommendations here. When it comes to Guzzlord in the Great League, the most important stat that it's worrying about here is going to be its defense stat, and I feel like all Great League Guzzlord, no matter how you cut it, really want to have at least a 63.74 defense stat. This defense stat will prevent Altaria, at least up to the rank 7's attack weight of Altaria, from getting a breakpoint on it. With avoiding that breakpoint, you now can flip the 1-1 shield scenario and have potential to flip the 2-2 shield scenario, which is a pretty big deal because one of the main things that keeps a lot of dragon type Pokemon from flourishing or being effective in the Great League is the fact that they can't beat Altaria. So being able to beat Altaria, I think, is a pretty big deal for Guzzlord. And I think the maximum defense stat that you should try to strive to go for is going to be 64.38, and then that will encompass the Trevenant Slaying Altaria attack weight. There could be even higher attack weighted Altaria that you run into out there, but at a highly competitive kind of level, typically you don't see Altaria that have greater attack than that attack weight. So I'd say 64.38 is a reasonable cap, but I think as a minimum 63.74 is effective enough for most purposes for the Guzzlord here. Now there are a lot of other defense breakpoints for Guzzlord, but the majority of them fall beneath the 63.74, and 63.74 is the bare minimum in my opinion, so it doesn't really make sense to address them all. 2 I will highlight though is going to be the Guzzlord mirror breakpoint for the 2-2 mirror, and you could have like as high defense as possible and still, have them get that breakpoint, but if they have a really high attack set, then you'll get the breakpoint back on them. It's just worth mentioning that there is a Guzzlord mirror breakpoint, but chasing after it is a little bit goofy, so just highlighting that. And then there's also having about 64 defense for the Vigoroth matchup, which can enable the 1-0 shield scenario. Vigoroth isn't that popular nowadays. It hasn't been popular for like well over a year, but it's something to keep in mind if you're looking at your Guzzlord options. Maybe pick the one with the higher defense stat, fortify yourself against the Altaria, fortify yourself against the Mirror, and then also fortify yourself against high-ranked Vigoroth as well. Now, having the 63.74 defense weight is great and all, but if you combine that with the 114.4 attack weight, you get a breakpoint on Altaria, and that breakpoint potentiates the 2-2 shield scenario as well, allowing you to beat Altaria that much more consistently. So here we have the 15 IV spreads that hit both this minimum defense weight and then also gets the attack check at the same time. Personally, I feel like sorting this list by defense is probably going to be the best way to use it, because the higher defense you have, the more fortified you're going to be against Altaria. Now, this attack weight doesn't just stop with Altaria either. With this attack weight, it potentiates the Frostlass 2-2 shield scenario. You may need a higher attack weight for a rank 1 Frostlass, but a lot of Frostlass like to have a little bit of an attack weight to get CMP on other Frostlasses, so typically they don't run that high in the defense. This can also enable the Drapion 1-2 shield scenario, I believe against the Shadow Drapion, which is pretty nice for a consistency buff, especially in dark type focused cups where you're going to see a lot of Guzzlords and Shadow Drapion. And then also Skuntank, the 1-1 shield scenario. Skuntank, another common Pokemon in dark type tups, and a powerful Pokemon in the Open Great League as well. This can also give you a benefit against Shadow Jumpluff too in the 2-2 shield scenario, but that's entirely dependent on how much of a defense weight the Shadow Jumpluff has. It's not that consistent, so I'd say the main focus is Altaria, and then all the wonderful stuff that comes after it. Now, of course, getting both the defense check and the attack weight's pretty unlikely. We only saw 15 different IV spreads there, right? Well, here's 33 bulk-focused IV spreads. This is using the maximum defense check of the 64.38. If you want more options, you can go down here on the list and edit this to make it closer to the minimum, so you got more options to work with there. And then this also uses 267 as the minimum HP check. With this HP check, you can still overcome Altaria in the 2-2 shield scenario despite not having the attack breakpoint. So while you're re-rolling IVs, trading with friends, trying to get, a stat that works out here, you have two options now. You have the high HP option, and then you also have the high attack option. With this higher bulk, you also have the potential to better overcome Sableye in the 1-2 bait scenario, where they bait you and land the return there. So check out that matchup on pvpoke.com against various attack-weighted Sableyes to see if your high bulk, or quote-unquote high bulk Guzzlord, is high bulk enough. And then with a higher bulk weight, you could also better take on the Swampert in the 2-2 shield scenario, where they end up landing the Earthquake. So that's another matchup to investigate as well if you're trying to see how much your bulk Guzzlord can handle. So between the high attack and the high HP weights of Guzzlord, which one's the best? And honestly, you'll be lucky if you get either of the IV spreads that were featured in the list there. I think there's 45 different IV spreads altogether if you combine those two lists, and your probability of achieving one of those IV spreads with good friend trades, so that's the one IV floor trade there, you'll have to do about 52 to 103 trades to have a 50% to 75% probability of getting any of those IVs, let alone the specific spread that you're looking for, let alone one of the more optimal looking spreads with like the higher defense or the higher HP on the list there. So it is really difficult to get one of these Guzzlord IV spreads. If you're curious for great friend trades, it'll take you about 79 to 158 trades to have a 50% to 75% probability. For Ultra Friend, it's going to take 138 to 276. So if you want to save some Stardust, I don't know if you're really going to be saving in the long run there, or saving your time and effort, and I guess money too, to get all these trades aligned, right? You could be trading all year, and you could never get the Guzzlord. And if you're thinking about best friend trades, you won't get any of them. It is a 0% chance to get any of the optimized Guzzlord PvP IVs by doing best friend trades. So good luck, buddy, right? Now, if you are just looking at the defense check only, the minimum defense check for the Altaria there, the 63.74, well, there's 149 different spreads that do that. So for a good friend trade, that's about 16 to 31 good friend trades, right? So it is a little bit more reasonable. So if you are trading, and you're trading along the way, and you've been trading all month, and you only have the defense check, you gotta have to question, like, am I gonna get the good friend trade? So, shoot for the moon, land among the stars. If you're super competitive, you do the Play Pokemon Championships, you're riding the edge of the Silpharina there, then you're probably gonna wanna go for one of the more high-end spreads, right? But if you're a GBL only type player, then I'd say just keep your aspirations tempered to just the defense weight, and you should be just fine. And in case you're worried, I do have a PvP IV table on GamePress here, showcasing the 149 49 different IV spreads that just meet the defense check and aren't too concerned about the HP or the attack. Then moving on to the Ultra League Guzzlord, I think the raid IVs are perfectly acceptable on an Ultra League Guzzlord as long as you have at least a 84 defense stat. So here I have a table showcasing the 33 different raid catch IV spreads that have at least the 84 defense. Probably sort by defense to have the best value here. Basically what 84 defense does is it protects you against the Snorlax lick breakpoint, and I didn't look too closely into the matchup because this was the only defense check that seemed to matter for the raid catch, right? So I didn't investigate it too thoroughly, but what it appeared on PvPoke is like even shield scenarios and shield disadvantage scenarios, Snorlax has an extremely good chance of defeating you by getting the lick break point, and the moment you take the lick break point away from it, then your ability to overcome it in even shields and even at a shield disadvantage increases dramatically. So yeah, if there's anything for a raid-only Guzzlord to think about, it's probably going to be this defense check, right? Another cheeky thing about raid IV Guzzlord 2 is after you cross 148.8 attack, you get a breakpoint on the Best Buddy Galarian Stunfisk, which potentiates your ability to overcome it in the 2-1 shield scenario. As far as raid-weighted Guzzlords are concerned, I'd say this one here, the rank quote-unquote 30, the 13, 15, 10, would be the best contender for the best of both worlds there, having the higher defense weight of Guzzlords that have this attack weight. But I would say that this breakpoint on the Galarian Stunfisk is more of a consolation prize, not a goal. So I wouldn't say that this is the magical best Guzzlord for raid-only Guzzlords. The best one is probably going to be the 10, 15, 10, honestly, because of the higher defense weight. But just something cheeky, something interesting to just highlight there when it comes to raid-only Guzzlords. Then when it comes to Ultra League Guzzlord trade IVs, I found that there was about 135 quote-unquote optimized IV spreads. First off, we got the defense stat of 85.45, which is nice for making the Air Slash Mandibuzz Best Buddy matchup more consistent for the 0-1 and 1-2 shield disadvantage scenarios. This defense breakpoint also fortifies you against the attack-weighted Toxicroak from my Toxicroak PvP IV Deep Dive, allowing you to do the 2-2 shield scenario actually, as so long as you have 339 HP. This 339 HP also syncs up with the Dragon Breath Giratina altered form. Having a high defense weight protects you from the Dragon Breath breakpoint, and then 339 HP is required for the 1-1 shield scenario. So for that reason, 339 is the HP that this list is set at as well. I didn't notice higher HP having like solid, concrete, even Steven shield scenario benefits. So obviously having higher HP could help you out, but I think 339 is a safe minimum. And then finally, I have an attack weighted added in here. You may notice that the rank 1 and rank 4 are absent, right? A ever so slight attack weight can make the Poison Jab Alolan Muck 1-2 shield scenario a lot more consistent, and the Empoleon 1-2 shield scenario that much more consistent, and then also potentiates the Escavalier 2-2 shield scenario. So I feel like this ever so slight attack weight that in reality you're probably going to get anyways, right? Because who's going to get the rank 1 good friend trade weight Guzzlord here? Let's get real, right? But I think that it's a neat little attack weight to be mindful of to make you more consistent in those matchups that you're already like supposed to be good at, and then also having potential against Escavalier there is pretty nice too. So yeah, and then it's 135 different IV spreads, so you can think of the probability of getting one of these being similar to just getting the minimum defense check for the Great League Guzzlord. So to that end, it's probably going to take you like 15 to 30 trades or so to get one of these. Basically, if you're on the quest, the long, thankless quest of getting one of the optimized Guzzlord Great League IVs, then there's a very high chance that you're probably going to pick up at least 1 or 2 of these IV spreads along the way. So if you are on that thankless quest, well, keep your eyes peeled for these IVs. And if you're not, well, I guess also keep your eyes peeled for these IVs. Now, if you happen to get one of the optimal Great League IV ones or a Great League one that you're satisfied with before you get a good Ultra League one on this list, is the Ultra League trade weight so much worth it over the raid weight that you should keep trading? And I think it comes down to your individual perspective on the matter. I personally would be perfectly content with just the with just the raid weighted ones. I think the advantages that are conferred by the higher bulk weights that trading can get you are pretty interesting, and they are pretty good if you happen to get them, but I don't think that they're so good that you should waste, hundreds of thousands of Stardust trying to trade to get them. So it's a personal kind of choice, right? If you're really into the Ultra League, you want to have the best of the best Guzzlord for that, then by all means go for it. But if you're not that into the Ultra League, these definitely aren't like super high priority picks here. So that's all I gotta say right now for Guzzlord's PvP IVs. Definitely a hard quest for the Great League. Pretty easy quest that you might not even have to take for the Ultra League. Yeah, if you got any questions on this content, of course, comment below. Let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. And if you enjoyed this kind of content, you want to see more like it, well, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. SwagTips. I'd also like to give a special shout out to these Patreon supporters. If you want to support Swagman on Patreon, link in the description.